You're listening to a Benstown and McVeigh Media Podcast Network production. Run It Again is an inside look at the players, the coaches, and the business of sports with former NFL star and broadcaster Ron Pitts.
And 2 minutes later, I was back in the same Oklahoma drill that I got the concussion from.
And the mastermind behind the greatest show on turf, Coach Mike Martz.
And we want to force him into a vanilla defense and go to work.
Run It Again is a hard-hitting, no BS podcast that connects you directly to the source. This is Run It Again.
Very special guest joining us here at Run It Again podcast, Ron Pitts, Mike Martz, and we are joined by super agent Leigh Steinberg. Boy, Leigh, longtime friend, man. We bump into each other now and then in different places, but good to have you on our podcast, buddy.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with ex-UCLA defensive back and the coach of the greatest show on turf. Super Bowl winning coach, 14-2, if I remember. What a year.
Well, thank you, Leigh. So good to have you on our podcast. Leigh, there's so many things I'd like to ask you that I'm curious about, but one of the things that what was the toughest negotiation of your career in your mind?
Well, it was anything with the Cincinnati Bengals owner Mike Brown. I had their first round draft pick in 1987, 1992, 1994, 1995, and 1999. And if I represented astronauts, Mike Brown would be the tight-fisted ruler of the moon.
Do you think he's changed over the years at all? Is it the same thing? No. How is it they've gone in the offseason and started doing some things with the free agency? That's kind of out of character, isn't it?
Yes, and they're a better team now.
No question.
But remember, I've done this for 48 years, and back in the old days, teams used to be able to claim they didn't have great revenue flow. It's a little harder when they're making $200 million a year before they open their doors from the TV contract nationally.
Yeah, you found out where the money bag is now, huh, Leigh?
Well, if you think about this, in the midst of a cratered economy, in a pandemic, the NFL was able to negotiate a new television contract this year, which goes up for Fox and CBS by 83%. Virtually doubles, and extends out for 10 years. So by the end of that, they'll be making roughly $350 million a year just from national TV.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And that doesn't include the gambling partnership, which quite frankly, Leigh, Coach and I, we still marvel at this because we know what the narrative was back in the day about gambling and NFL relationships. So now to see all this happening is quite eye-opening, to say the least.
Well, the danger has always been this, that if somehow an athlete went into gambling debt and was tempted to shave performance in the game, then all of a sudden it wouldn't be a level playing field, and people would start to think of pro sports like wrestling as somehow not an actual contest. And so the thought that you would have pari-mutuel betting at stadia themselves, that you would have NFL teams owning part of fantasy football betting platforms, and that you'd have the Raiders, the Oakland Raiders would now be the Las Vegas Raiders. Mm-hmm. They would also have a hockey team and probably soon an NBA team. Just stunning.
Yeah. It really is. And again, it's a new landscape. We get it. I get it financially. And as you just talked about, the TV contracts and what's on the horizon as far as that's concerned. But it makes us think now, what's coming next in terms of partnerships with the NFL?
Exactly. And so you have a sport that has brand new stadia with jumbo scoreboards, with ancillary revenue streams coming everywhere. You've got fantasy sports. You've got a new thing called NFT. So if you weren't amazed by gambling taking over. How about the fact that we did a deal with Patrick Mahomes where there's some pieces of art that are iconic moments. And so you can bid on these, buying these. At the end of the day, someone put $155,000 up for a picture of Patrick Mahomes that only exists on the internet, right?
Oh, wow.
It doesn't, when you bid on these NFTs, you win the right to uniquely put this up on, your social media, but it doesn't physically exist, in the world the way the three of us know it. So you can monetize virtually anything now.
Yep.
Over the years, Leigh, who's your favorite organization to deal with that you felt did the best job?
In football, the New England Patriots were an exceptionally well-run team. And really, when you come down to it, the key to winning in sports is the quality of the organization. I mean, the players go round and round, but it's the owner and stability and a vision. It's a front office that has talent in drafting and trading and cutting. And it's so much about the head coach who has a system, and it can be one of any systems. So the whole goal of the NFL is to have parity. So it's to have teams go through a process of rebuilding, then they sit on top for 3 or 4 years, and they come back down and the rest of it. So anytime, and they have a draft that does that, and free agency and all sorts of things to help teams that are not winning. When you see a team like New England sit at the top, or in your day, Mike, the St. Louis Rams were really well run. They had every part of it down. And so you see teams like that, how Baltimore wins year after year, how Pittsburgh, not this year, but normally wins year after year. These are teams that are exceptionally well run. Right now, the LA Rams is another one of those organizations. And in a normal year, the Kansas City Chiefs would be one of those organizations, but it's a tougher year for them.
So what are some of the factors that make them such a well-run organization, Leigh?
It's the having an owner who listens to people and reaches out. When someone like Bob Kraft bought the New England Patriots, he talked to everybody in the league about what it took to create a great personnel person, to evaluate talent, to put together a concept of how you build a football team. So it's having an owner that actually has knowledge about what he knows and what he needs to put around him. And then it's a front office, the ability to evaluate talent in a draft or free agency or trading, the ability to know which players to keep or what. So it's having a system that works, and it could be anything.
Sure.
Pittsburgh Steelers used to like stubby, bodied little offensive linemen, but who had big bulk. The Raiders wanted, or the Cowboys wanted, big, tall. It could be whatever it is. Jimmy Johnson just cared about defensive players being fast. Okay, so you could have one of any system, but these people have it, and they don't change every year. They don't fire their coach over and over again. They don't. They have stability, and the players have continuity.
Is there over the many years that you've been doing this, is there somebody that really sticks out in terms of being an excellent evaluator over the long haul?
Well, I mean, I think the best there ever was Bill Polian, because you have to give him, even though he hates agents, but
yeah, I know that personally.
but let's give him the fact that he built the Buffalo Bills into a team that went 4 straight years to the Super Bowl. And football being unforgiving, people remember them as the worst team because they lost 4 Super Bowls, where really they were one of the best 2 teams to do it. And it was amazing. And then he goes down to Carolina and puts that together. So their second year, they're in the playoffs,
Right,
an
that's amazing.
expansion team. And then you get him up at Indianapolis, and he puts that together as a great franchise. So I think he, can do it really well. Who's ever at the Rams today is doing it really well, because they're making trades and doing things that are incredibly uplifting for the team.
Yeah. Leigh, you've represented just about anyone who is someone in at least in the sport of football. And I know you've branched out in other sports as well, from Steve Brutkowski, who they say is your first client. I guess, the one on the radar, and you'll tell if that's not true or not, but to Patrick Mahomes. That said, what is the first step to a successful partnership with an athlete? How does it begin?
So everyone in the world values suasion, but in reality, it's listening skills that are critically important. So I need to create enough trust around an athlete where they'll share their value system and priorities. So I really understand what's critically important to them. And if you can put yourself in the heart and mind of another human being and see the world the way they see it, and if you can understand their greatest anxieties and fears and their greatest hopes and dreams as they define it, not what the world thinks of it, but as that unique individual, if I can get that person to open up and really understand, then I can shape a life program for them that starts with the path to the draft, leads into mentoring them into being a great veteran. And 12 of our players are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in football, and then to a second career, so that I'm as proud that Bruce Smith, the all-time sack leader, owns part of the biggest luxury hotel in Washington and is vice president of a construction company, or that 3 of my former athletes became actual owners of teams. Work done. The former running back with Atlanta owns part of the Atlanta Falcons. And so for this generation, ownership. And so it's listening skills, and then being able to get uniquely into that person, not represent them generically, but then really fulfill their dreams over time. And it doesn't finish until until Brent Jones, the tight end of the 49ers, understood he was playing in Silicon Valley and put together a $4 billion hedge fund.
Oh, wow.
That's impressive.
Wow. Has the process in terms of negotiating with teams changed much over the years, Leigh? Is it different now than perhaps 10 years ago?
Very much, because when the salary cap came in 1993 for rookies, we were still able to craft ways around it. So I did a thing with Drew Bledsoe in 93, the first year, called Voidable Years. So he would get to a certain point in his rookie contract, the years would go away, and so they'd have to renew him as a veteran. But when the 2010 collective bargaining agreement came out, 2011, it tightly structured how draft picks are paid. So there's a minimum and a maximum, and there really is much less of an art of negotiating, because the team will normally max out what they're allowed under the cap to pay a player, and they'll make that offer. And so instead of having in our day, the long holdouts with players late to training camp, they're not late anymore. That's a good thing for football.
Notice that. Yeah.
Where do you think the league's headed? Is it things are going to get better for them, or is it leveling off, do you think, the NFL and, financially and just in terms of, I guess,
This country has a love affair going with the NFL that is unlike anything I've seen in my lifetime. When we were all growing up, it was baseball, but now it's football.
Yeah.
And by 3-1, pro football is the most popular sport in this country, and 71 of the top 100 Nielsen-rated primetime shows were football. NFL football. And right behind that is college football. So we're still entering an era where the revenue's expanding and gate revenue's expanding, luxury box revenue, sponsorship, television, all sorts of other plays, fantasy sports, memorabilia. It's all exploding and it's going nowhere soon. It's going to continue to grow. The biggest threat to pro football, I believe, is the danger that concussion poses to athletes. And because it's started to become clear that every time a lineman hits a lineman at the line of scrimmage at the inception of a play, that produces a low-level subconcussive event, just a little bit of brain change. So you could have an offensive lineman walk out of football with, having played in high school and college, with 10,000 subconcussive hits, none of which have been diagnosed, none of which he's aware of. You just feel stunned like you do on any play. And all of which could lead to the same thing that 3 concussions do, which is propensity towards Alzheimer's, premature senility, Parkinson's, and chronic traumatic encephalopathy and depression. So my feeling is, if you want to look to the future, Coach, if 50% of the mothers and fathers in the country understand the facts about concussion and tell their teenage boys, you can play any sport, but not tackle football, it won't immediately kill football, but little by little, it'll start to drift and it'll become a gladiator sport where the only people who play it are like the people who box or fight in UFC.
Yeah.
I know they've got a chance of brain damage, but they need it for economic reasons. And I love football. I don't want to see that happen. So I've held 16 concussion conferences and we've explored a whole variety of ways to make the game safer.
It seems like it has had an effect on high school football. The numbers out for football, I think, at that point. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Leigh, was I know the commissioner is really dead set on getting a franchise over in Europe. Do you see that happening?
Not really, because it's hard enough to travel coast to coast. But if you look at the teams that play in London and then look at their next game, I mean, they're out of sort. And the whole thing that most coaches are trying to get going is continuity and a rhythm during the season. Now, all of a sudden, it's 14 hours from here on the West Coast to fly to London. I see that as being difficult to work into a routine that would fit. It would just, those players who'd have to play overseas would be imbalanced. And then if you had the franchise there, they would have to fly the opposite way to play a game with Seattle or with the Rams.
Right. Do you see a need, Leigh, for some sort of minor league, if you will, football?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The worst thing right now is that Canada didn't even play last year. So we all know, with Kurt Warner, we all know that the system misses people because you have training camp and you very quickly have to get ready for the season. And a whole lot of players on the roster just don't get seen playing at their position. They might play special teams. So what happens? The cuts come, and now they cut every single extra player on one day. They used to do it gradually, but now it's all done on one day. You've got 1,200 players cut and heading for the exit. Some of them sign on practice squads, but there are many talented players who never get the chance to show what they have. And there ought to be a place for them to do it, whether it's the XFL or the AAF or the arena. Those leagues are really good. And a number of players on the teams and like that AAF and came into the NFL and did fine. Yeah,
I guess probably the only way that's going to happen is if the league would endorse it and support it. Without their support, I don't think any of those leagues have a chance over the long haul, do they?
Well, they do, and here's why. Because television has expanded from 3 networks to being 300 different options, right? And so now all of a sudden, if you get a TV contract, what we've come to see is if you watch last night's Monday Night Football game, most Americans would rather watch mediocre football than great something else, right?
Mhm.
And so we're so crazy for it. I've always thought that if a person who became a very noted politician hadn't ruined it, the USFL would have made it, and the
Yeah.
USFL would have made it, and right now we probably would have had 4 or 5 of those teams absorbed into the NFL. I mean,
Yeah.
and so you can put the ratings for the AAF were reasonable for a first-year team, and I actually think that as long as you have a few well-known names from college football or something else, then people will watch.
Do you think the league will expand with new teams? I know there's a lot of talent out there, like you said, that gets missed. Do you think there's enough out there to expand the league to more teams?
Well, you need a city that can support a stadium and a team. And you if they let Jacksonville in the league, which at that time was the 55th largest marketed TV in the country, and Carolina, which was the 32nd, then I'm sure they can probably, find new areas. I mean, we have 17 million people in Southern California that could get to a stadium within 2 hours. So the answer is not soon, but I would never say never.
Yeah. Do you think the league wants San Diego or to have another team? Is there a chance that the Chargers could come back to San Diego?
I've never liked the concept of teams losing. Now, in baseball, I helped Mayor Jordan in San Francisco save the Giants who were leaving the city. And I fought against that. And I was chairman to save the Rams, no offense, but we wanted to keep them in Southern California.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't make any sense to take a team away from a place like San Diego, where you have loyal fans who supported the team through thick and thin. If a pro team can be taken from a city, then when they say we're your Oakland Raiders, with the implied obligation to come win or lose, because that team's as much a part of the area as the Golden Gate Bridge, right?
Right.
My son came to me when the Rams were leaving, and he said, "What do you mean they're leaving, Dad? How can a football team leave?
Right.
I mean, is Disneyland next? Or we're going to give away Knott's Berry Farm? How?" So I think San Diego desperately needs a team, and they deserve one. So yes, that would be a logical first place.
Yeah, there's a lot of people down here to be happy with that, and that's for sure, as you know.
What did the people of San Diego do wrong to lose their team? Maybe they wouldn't publicly fund the stadium.
Well, it started off, Lee, years ago when they first did the contract. I think the city really felt like they got, I guess, screwed, if you will, for lack of a better term, on the contract in terms of, I think, some of the concessions, and all those things. And the club kind of made out on it, and they were determined not to let that happen again. Everything was one way, I guess, is the easiest way in their mind, in the city council's mind, and the mayor. Everything had been one way. And now here they come and they say they want to be funded again for a stadium. And they just, down here, they just said, no way, we're not doing that.
The current model is private funding, right?
No question. No question.
So the point is that the league would have helped that team in financing. And what you see in the new model is you create an activity zone around the stadium. So like where Qualcomm was. You create other businesses, other things, and then you privately fund a stadium. I mean, this is not an era where, especially with the pandemic, where we're voting tax money to private businesses to build a private stadium. It's just the owners can figure out how to build the stadiums.
Yeah. Leigh, Coach and I talk a lot about this next topic. The NIL that's been put in place for college athletes. They can now receive endorsements, get endorsements, sign contracts, things of that nature. I'm kind of split on it for a lot of reasons, namely supporting the athletes that are going to be making decisions contract wise that could affect them the rest of their life, and informing them on how to do it. Give me your thoughts on this. Is this a good thing at the end of the day? Is it a problem? Are we headed toward a problem for our amateur athletes doing this right now, the way we put it in place?
Well, the colleges brought this upon themselves, and the NCAA did too, because if you had an athlete from a middle class or affluent background, they lived just fine on scholarship check. But if you had an athlete from a economically challenged background, they might be sending part of the scholarship check home to their family, and they would come to a campus like UCLA or SC, and the non-athletic peers could work during the school year to supplement their income, and the athlete in modern day just can't do that. So that you had athletes living at a lower standard of living without access to a car and not able to get an apartment near campus. And they looked up at the stadiums, they saw they were filled, they read about the TV contracts, and they saw their number being sold in the student store. All the campuses had to do was, if there were special needs, supplement the revenue to bring the player back to the standard of living. You didn't have to pay them like Rogers, but they wouldn't do it. And California passed SB 206, knowing that would lead the way. And since July 1st, when it took effect, it's been a landslide, an avalanche of deals. And it hasn't just, now we signed Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma, who now is having his bench, but got off to a fast start. We signed Malik Willis, the quarterback from Liberty. And what you're doing with him is you're branding. Now, the downside of this program is that when you see Nick Saban announce publicly that his quarterback had $1 million in deals, could you imagine a football coach taking a player who had never played a down and publicly touting how much money they'd made? Normally what a coach would do is say, now don't put too much expectations on this young guy. Make sure that you give him time to build into his position, right? And all that.
I don't hear that anymore.
He did that. That's recruiting. He was recruiting. But what you've seen with NIL is it hadn't just been the football quarterbacks. It's been some programs, every single player is in men and women's sports is getting $1,000 or $500. We've seen all sorts of businesses. See, you got alums who want to support the football program. And now, instead of giving directly to the football program, they're using their business to supplement, player revenue. So here's what I think the worst dangers are. One, that we talked with Patrick Mahomes his first 2 seasons and suggested he do no endorsements. Why? Because we wanted his play on the field. We wanted to prove to the owner, the general manager, the coach, he was serious about football, the other players on the team, and then put something out there charitably. As you know, we asked that all the players go back to the high school, college, and pro communities and set up charitable foundations and scholarship funds. We wanted him to do things like that before we were all over billboards and all over television. So you've got the problem that you're taking a young player, and they may have market value, but have they developed their career? Second of all, you might have jealousy if the offensive lineman is making nothing and the quarterback's making $1 million a year. And so I think those are problems with it, but they waited too long at the NCAA to loosen up the system, and this is what happened.
Yeah, and there's no guidance program that at least nationally I'm aware of that informs the student athlete.
Well,
that tells the student athlete, here's what a contract is. Here's what the word in perpetuity means. Here's what you're actually signing up for. It's not just a click and an acceptance on a social media.
But it actually is working, that most of the key players have marketing agents working with them
already. Yeah.
The marketing agents are the ones who are doing this. You still cannot sign a player undergrad who's got eligibility left to an agency contract, but you can sign them to a marketing contract.
Marketing. Yeah.
So we weren't just dealing with Spencer Rattler. He had a family that was very much involved. They had asked all the same questions they would have asked. Many campuses are trying to help the players themselves. They are teaching, you'd be happy to know, Ron, they are talking to the players about
that's good.
The issues you brought up. There are many different groups that are doing this, but I virtually never meet with a player before I've met with his parents, and maybe 15 times. And it's an afterthought that you actually meet with the player because they've got plenty to do during the season without worrying about agents. But it's here, it's everywhere. It's what female athletes that were in the Olympics. That young gymnast from Auburn is doing just fine.
Yeah. I heard from some of the mid-level colleges that they're concerned that some of the money that's gifted to the university will be taken away towards those players, and that they would hurt some of their endowments, et cetera. I don't know if that's accurate or if that's even an issue.
I think it's just, you know what, Mike? I think it just adds to, there's so much excitement about college football and college basketball. I think it just adds to it. If anything, it's going to make alums give more
that's
than
a
they
good
gave
point.
before. It's not gonna now they have different ways to give money. And they use successful alums who have successful businesses are using them to supplement programs.
Yeah.
And they
how's
can take business expense. The last thing I was going to say is they can take it as a business expense, so it makes them more willing to put the money in.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Well, Leigh, we appreciate your time. We know you've got a bunch of things to do, and probably that phone's ringing off the hook as we're talking right here. So, but we always appreciate you, man. It's good talking to you again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. My pleasure, and good luck on your podcast.
Thanks.
Thank
Leigh.
you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Leigh Steinberg, super agent, spending some time with us there. And Mike, I always learn something, right? I always learn something new every time we talk to Leigh. So that was great. You and Leigh have talked quite a bit in the past, haven't you, Mike? I got that feeling.
Well, we kind of know each other a little bit. Of course, as a head coach, you get a chance to talk to some of those agents, but I know from the front office people, they always, they had high regard for him as an agent and his ethics. And, there's good ones and bad ones, of course. Unfortunately, there's more bad ones, and he's one of the good ones.
Yeah. Mike, before we start the show, I got to say, man, I'm liking this look I'm seeing from you. This is that tough guy look, that mountain man look. Not that you're not a mountain man or a tough guy. Yeah, you got the chops, as they say, right? Back in Sioux Falls, the chops.
Yeah, the chops will keep coming because I'm trying to hide these rolls that are underneath here. Cover up some of the age, I guess.
Yeah, right. Well, I got my USF hat on. That's
very nice.
Sioux Falls University. Thank you very much.
South Dakota.
And they're rolling, Mike. They're trying to roll a little bit now. They went up to Minnesota State in Mankato and survived a tough one. Well, actually, it blew them out first half, and then it got tough late. But the they're still hanging in there. They got a chance for the playoffs, so they gotta keep it going. They got Wayne State this week.
Ooh,
son's
that's
team.
a good team. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in Sioux Falls for people that don't know, and I'm from Sioux Falls. That's where I was born. So natural connection.
That's right. Every time we go there, we see the Mike Martz statue.
The statue,
Mike
yeah.
Martz
Yeah.
residence here.
Sure.
And there's even a Mike
the house
Martz.
that Mike Martz was raised in. Yeah.
Right. No, there's a museum tour that you can walk through and everything. It's great. We've taken
You
the
walk
tour.
in, walk out, right? It's a phone booth.
We've taken the tour several times now, and they're opening up
I
an
bet.
ice rink right up the street here. So we'll
Yeah.
right down the street from the house. So
I'm
anyway,
sure,
let's talk some football here. Boy, the Monday night game. Oh, man, that was Kansas City and the Giants. Not the greatest game, but I think Kansas City survived it somehow.
Kansas City, they're just not very good. It was two bad teams to me when you watch them both play. And one of the things that bothers me about Mahomes right now, he doesn't look anything like the Mahomes that we've seen in the past. And I know all the issues that they've got. They're not very good on defense. The offensive line that they retooled, just not very good. They're just not. But he's trying to make throws that he just shouldn't try to make. Trying to make plays he doesn't need to try to make, and trying to be creative. You just don't do that. You get in trouble doing all that stuff. And biggest thing that I've noticed here in the last 2 weeks is he's just not very accurate. He's missed some throws that he didn't miss, and he's missing throws. So, they got away with it, but they're not going to go very far if they play like that. They beat the Giants, who's not very good. So,
yeah, and I'm noticing guys like Kelsey are dropping balls. He looks doesn't look like the same guy.
Yeah, there's a downer kind of atmosphere there right now. There's just no energy to anything that they do. The two little receivers took off, and I can't remember his name, number 17. He ran that little reverse in there and put it in the end zone at the end to win it. But Hill is just he might be my pick for player of the year, MVP, at least offensive player of the year. I mean, how do you stop him? What do you have? Another 13 or 14 catches last night, or
right? Yeah, exactly. And they just look different. Something's not right.
There's
something in the building.
They're just like I said. It's almost they've lost some games they didn't know how to deal with it. They just don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to get back on track, and that's hard to do. I've been there. So the other thing, Ron, and I was, there's three teams won that beat substantial opponents with a backup quarterback.
I was going to ask you about all that last week. Yeah.
That's never happened. That's never happened. So you got Mike White with the Jets throws for the last time they threw for 400 yards was in the year 2000 when Vinny Testaverde. Those for 405 yards or whatever it was, caught a touchdown, threw a couple, and the Cooper Rush thing, that game that against, the Cowboys versus Minnesota, he came off the bench and just was superb. He did a great job.
Yeah.
He still threw for like 330 yards. He made key throws and, and that's no easy task. Minnesota's a good team. They're really a good team. At least they've lost some games that they should have won, but they compete very well and they're a good team.
Especially in Minnesota. Tough team to beat no matter what. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, no question. And then New Orleans with their third team quarterback beats Brady in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who saw that coming?
Right.
Simeon, and I was down there and I remember watching him a little bit, but he played, for the amount of practice he's had, he played really well. He had to go in there in a pinch and he got it done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's go back to the Jets deal there with Mike White, 37 of 45, 405 yards, as you were talking about, 2 interceptions. But, is that a case, Mike, where Cincinnati coming off the big win the week before, they're going in to play the winless Jets, and it's no matter what you tell guys, well, excuse me, not winless. They had one win up to that point. No matter what you tell guys, they just can't believe that, hey, this is going to be a tough game. Every game's a tough game in this business.
So I think you're right, Ron. I do think that here, Cincinnati, a team that's learned how to win. Mm-hmm. They've never been off to a start like this. They're acting like a playoff team. They get this big win, and then the giant letdown against the Jets. And that's not to say the Jets didn't play well. I don't mean that, but Cincinnati gave up 500 yards now, over 100 yards in rushing, 400 yards in passing. You give up 500 yards, you're going to get beat, buddy. You just are. And So they didn't show up for the most part. And I do think that, obviously the quarterback played good, but is that because he's that good, or is it because Cincinnati was that bad? I saw a bit of the game. I was trying to watch as many games as I could. I saw some of it, and Cincinnati just looked bad.
The Dallas-Minnesota game. So there was 2 plays in that game, which I thought defined the game, and then a coaching decision I want to ask you about with Zimmer. So as the Cowboys are going down the field there on that last drive, Zimmer got into a situation, the coach for the Vikings, he got into a situation where he called back-to-back timeouts. Now, the new rule is, or the newer rule is, if you cannot call back-to-back timeouts, number one. And if you do call back-to-back timeouts, the officials are trained to ignore the second request for the timeout. And what they did was they penalized the Vikings 5 yards. They moved the ball up. So now the next play, they throw the little swing pass, I believe, to Zeke Elliott. He busts a tackle, and instead of it being like a 3rd and 16, it was a 3rd and 10. And so he converts the first down. And that was huge down at that end of the field because they were getting close. So I want to ask you about that play, and then I'll go to the next play. But is that a coaching error on Zimmer's part?
All right. So what happened is if somebody's trying to call a second timeout, like you said, they're supposed to ignore it. But if the official inadvertently accepts it and makes a call, then they have to penalize that team.
Then they have,
and they have a choice. And I believe it was a player that called timeout. So I don't believe that's the coach didn't do that. Zim didn't do that. He did the first one, and then they got discombobulated down there. I think it was a personnel change. They're trying to match up, and then the player just called timeout, not realizing they didn't have anything left. So and that happens. That does happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then the second part of that was just an amazing play, a fluke play on the deep ball to Amari Cooper. And, I tell my son, my one that's up at Sioux Falls playing, he's a corner. And I say, listen now, son, when you play in this business, in this position, that corner position, you're walking out into the middle of town and, you're going to draw. And there's going to be one guy walks away and there's going to be one guy laying on the ground. That's the nature of this business. And that was a perfect example. The ball ricochets off Cooper. It hits the corner in the chest, but he's turned around and not focused on it. Bounces back to Cooper, and then Cooper takes it and runs, a few more yards up the field. And when I saw that, I said, Vikings are done. I just knew. I've seen that. And Mike, now let's go back, because we're older, right? Let's go back to how many times have you seen Roger Staubach throw a ball to Drew Pearson, to who else was there? Any number of the Preston Pearson. How many times have you seen Tony Hill? How many times have you seen them come back just like that?
Oh, yeah.
Whether it was Cooper Rush, whether it was Dak Prescott, whether it was Troy Aikman, whether it was Roger Staubach, that was the old school Dallas Cowboy comeback right there. For those of you who don't know what it looks like, that's what it was. And if you don't believe me, just Google it.
Well, the other thing that was impressive about it is Cooper Rush didn't have a whole lot of, practice for this game to come in and play as well as he did and make those throws. And put it, there's no hesitation. And that's the first thing I look at in those situations, especially those long balls. They want to throw them out of bounds because they don't want to throw an interception. That's where they're backups, right? So they don't want to throw a pick, so they're supposed to throw it. So they kind of throw it way wide, and it's either out of bounds or over his outside shoulder. He didn't do that. He put it up where he could make a catch, and it's hoping that works out well for you, and it does. You expect when you make a long throw, as you used to tell the quarterbacks, if you're going to put the ball out there, if you're going to make that throw, then make the best throw you can. Put it on him and let him. It's up to him now to make that play. And then tell the receivers, and he makes that throw and gives you an opportunity. The last thing that should ever happen is an interception.
The last thing that should ever happen. Interesting. And he made that throw in the end zone.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't play scared. He
No.
put it up on the fade, and I was like, yeah, no, the guts are there. They got these guys. And here's what didn't help Minnesota. This was lost. Not one announcer brought this up. I haven't read about it yet. The Vikings were 1 for 13 on third down. You don't deserve to win when you can't convert third downs.
No, that was surprising. And again, Dallas is a totally different team than they were a year ago defensively. And to their credit, put plenty of pressure on the quarterback, and they clamped down the receivers. And they weren't, a year ago or the last 2-3 years there, on 3rd and 4 and 5, you're going to get a holding penalty. They're going to latch onto that receivers. They're just not very confident in the back end there. So they're dramatically a different team right now.
Dramatically.
The energy that went out of the room in Kansas City is at Dallas right now.
Good point. Great point. Moving on here to that final young quarterback, backup quarterback, whatever you want to call it, that jumped in. You talked about Simeon down in New Orleans. Sad to see that Jameis Winston is gone for the season with the injury. Simeon comes in 16 of 29, 159 yards, no interceptions. He looked smooth, but Tom Brady, on the other hand, helped him out. Tom Brady, 2 interceptions. He struggles against the Saints during the regular season.
He does. And there's that coordinator changes the coverage on him at the snap a lot. And Tom is a genius in terms of figuring out what you're doing, where the ball's got to go. So they fooled him big time. They played robber coverage on him, but didn't show it. So what happens on robber coverage, for those of you who don't know, it looks like it's a 2 deep coverage. On the snap, one guy goes deep and the other guy drops right down the middle of the field and will sit there and rob anything.
Yeah.
He didn't drop down. He stayed wide and baited him into the throw. And then he came down and picked that ball off.
Yeah.
And I saw that. I said, it was pretty, that was the last pick. And that was pretty awesome. That's the score. And then he got a score out of that. So he came down, looked like it was too deep. That off safety took off and went to the middle, but he hung there wide. And I'm sure Tom felt like that's a half field safety. But as soon as he saw Brady start to make that throw, man, he closed down hard in the middle and picked it off, stepped in front of it.
That robber coverage is a great coverage. We were playing San Francisco one year out when I was in Green Bay, and Chuck Cecil picked off Montana twice with robber coverage. And it's funny, we didn't run that the whole season, didn't show it in training camp, and really weren't a big robber team. But for whatever reason, our coaches saw something, felt like we could get something. Maybe it was a crossing routes, because they like to do a lot of underneath stuff. And Joe threw into it, and it was pretty amazing. To your point, that's how lethal that coverage can be if you run it right and you're not expecting it.
If you're preparing for a team that only runs a little bit of it, you still have to coach it like it's one of their primary coverages on third down.
Yeah.
Because when it shows up, the ball's got to go to the outside receivers. You can't throw anything inside. You can't. And we used to tell the quarterbacks, and I remember a preseason game, we had a veteran quarterback, and I think it was Hostetler, and we told him 11 hour, we're trying to throw that F post in there. I said, you can't get it off soon enough. Even though it looks like it, you can't. It's not going to happen. Well, he's a vet. He can do what he wants. So he puts that ball in there. It's a pick six. Ran it back. Right. It was against the Chargers. I'll never forget. And that backside safety, he came all the way across the field. He read his eyes. Yeah. Picked it off in his full stride and took it in. So,
Mike, especially if you go ahead and take a couple steps, like you're going to the post, the deep half as a safety, and then drop down, get low, and sneak down in that hole. Boy, it's dirty, man.
But what he did in the game, that safety did is he hung back a little bit, just backpedaled back. So he didn't. Tom would have really recognized him if Brady would have recognized him if he'd come down right away. He hung back, read his eyes. And then as soon as he got his eyes on, he waited for the ball to get in the air because he didn't back up. So he was already in position. Yeah. He didn't back up and come down. He just hung there. But still, as you're the quarterback, things are going so fast, you still see the safeties apart. Right.
That's
right. And he never saw him come down.
Well,
he did. In other words, they got his number at New Orleans. They really do in terms of coverage, and they've got a pass rush. They're fast. They get to him. They jostle him around a little bit. They get him antsy and trying to get the ball out faster than what he would like to, and they do a good job on him.
They got his number during the regular season, but
Yes,
they
right.
don't have it during the playoffs. So let's see if that changes.
Right.
All right, Mike,
exactly.
we're gonna move forward here. We only got about 10 minutes left. Some big trades. Well, one big trade, Von Miller going to the Rams for a D2, a D3. That's a second round pick, a third round pick in the draft next year. But the big injury news, I think, is Derrick Henry. That one shocked me. So what does Tennessee do? And do you expect them, not that there's a whole lot available running back wise, do you expect them to try to make a move for a running back at the
I'm sure
11th
they
hour
will.
here?
Yeah, I'm sure they'll try to make a move on a runner somewhere. You know,
Yeah.
Baltimore got down there and had to bring 3 guys in off the street there as the season started, as you'll remember. So, I mean, they've got some, I don't know what the roster is with their running backs right now, but they'll have to bring another running back in, and then, you know, maybe they have somebody there that they kind of like too. So we'll see.
Yeah. November 2nd, that's today, is the close of the trading deadline. So at a certain time today, all trades will be off. So someone brought up the name Ronald Jones with Tampa Bay, but Tampa Bay seems to be happy with Ronald Jones, and
They're happy unless
yeah,
unless it depends on the value that they're going to get for him. You know, they're happy with him,
yeah,
but you know, oh, I'd never sell this. How much?
yeah, right, yeah. Fournette, guess what? One of you guys,
Yeah, right.
yeah, we'll
Fournette,
see.
you just can't carry the ball. You got more touches now, buddy. That's
Yeah,
all.
right. Melvin Ingram looks like he's going to Kansas City from Pittsburgh. He's a former Charger linebacker. He's bouncing around a little bit. That was rough. The injury to Henry, that to me now changes everything in the AFC.
Well, it does to some extent. I'm just curious. They're still committed to run the football. So whoever gets in, there's not going to be Derrick Henry, but they
Right.
will still, you know, rally and run the football because they're really good up front. They're really good offensive line. It may change how they run it a little bit, but they'll still stay with that. And Tannehill's really playing well. They're playing really good on defense. So, you know, it's just the next guy in line. It's kind of what you used to say. Who's up next? You know, that's kind of how you have to
Next
look at
man
it.
up. But Mike, Tannehill he's a product of the big man running the football in that offensive line. Right.
He is. You know,
Yeah.
to ask him to go win a game throwing the football every week, he's probably not going to be able to do that. But he's much better. He's a much better player than I ever thought he was coming out of Miami. When he's at Miami, he was a hit or miss guy, but he's really played well there. So,
Yeah.
and they do a great job of coaching. They don't ask these guys to do something that they're really not, you know, able to do. They'll still stay committed to the running game. You watch, they will.
Yeah. No, I like Tannehill. I like him a lot. And yeah, again, they did what good teams do. They found a way to win that game. And what Wentz had a couple throws that I know right now he wishes he could take back.
Oh, some
But that's
dumb.
but
That's Carson. Remember, when you add up the number of starts in his career, there's not very many.
yeah, guess not.
There's not very, when you look at, you know, because of the injuries and time missed and all that,
Yeah.
there's just not a lot of starts.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still a bit of a project. You know, he's not there yet, but he'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep an eye on that one. Like I said, all of a sudden things seem to have changed in that division now. In Indianapolis, that would have been a big win for them. That would have taken them, you know, to one game below 500 at 4-5 instead of 3-5. And probably the bright spot for Tennessee on that day is that they got the win.
Yeah.
Although
So
losing
it puts
Derrick
him
Henry,
like 2 games ahead of him.
6-2. Yeah.
Yeah.
6-2. Yeah.
Right.
But losing, the price they paid for that one is big. So we'll see. How that
One
goes.
other thing real quick.
Yeah.
Just saw this. Probably the guy I wouldn't want to be today is Mike White at the Jets.
Yeah.
Because
I know why. Right.
Because no matter who they play, the expectation is he's going to come out and do the same thing. You know, that's just not going to happen. You know, it's just
Right.
not gonna happen. I don't know who they're playing this week either. I really don't. But he's giving them life and excitement and all that sort. And he'll play okay, but it's not going to be like it was last week. And,
What do you say?
and that's what Jets fans, that's what they're going to expect. They're going to expect another miracle kind of a situation, and maybe he does it. I don't know, but
Yeah. Well, they're going to play the Colts in Indy.
yeah.
So the Colts will be mad. They'll be
Yeah.
breathing fire.
Yeah, that's not a good
right.
place right now.
That's not a good
'Cause
matchup.
you don't want to go play them today. Yeah, no, that's not going to be good for them.
Right. All right. Well, since we're on to next week, let's go to next week. And we talked about that Jets Indy game. That's a big game for both teams. It's a big game for the Jets because now, like you say, the quarterback and the team wants to prove that, okay, well, that wasn't
We're
a fluke
for real.
and
Yeah.
we're for real. And as much as you try to prevent a quarterback controversy, there's already one there now in New York, and that's great because the writers in New York will have something to write about.
But
they love that.
But you look at what the Jets did. They came off of just a beat down from the week before.
Mm-hmm.
Just an absolute beat down. Well, I can't remember the score, but they got beat by 5 touchdowns, right? So now they come in and they pull this off. So with Robert Saleh there as the head coach, this really is a defining moment for him. If they can go in and win this game, that will be his signature when this thing completely turns around.
That's right. That was the Patriots that beat him up pretty bad, 54-13. Hey, Mike, before we go to the rest of the games this week, I want to get your opinion on something. So the Patriots are at UCLA right now. They're there practicing because they played the Chargers this week, and Herbert had a couple picks and a couple weren't his fault, but that was a rough game. But is that unusual? Because they play Carolina at Carolina next week. So why are they staying out here?
Probably weather, or I really don't know. I don't know. Usually that happens if you're going to play San Francisco the next week. Right?
That's exactly right. Or Arizona or Seattle. Yeah. You stay on the West Coast, right?
I really don't know.
Okay. All right.
But Bill, there's a good reason, I promise you, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah. And they played a double out here last year. They played the Rams and then they played the Chargers kind of back to back, but that they don't have that case this year. So anyway.
So think about this. Think about this. After that game, you have to go on the road twice in 1 week. So in other words, you got to go from San Diego back home, and then you got to go down to Carolina. So that's 2 trips that now you don't have to make. You just make 1.
Right.
So maybe that's his logic.
Yeah. All right, here, 2 games, and then we're going to get out of here. That Packer-Arizona game, last Thursday night. Give me your thoughts.
Well, that's Green Bay. You can never forget about Green Bay. They're down. They don't have their first 2 receivers.
Yeah.
And they come out and they were able to do what they did. Defensively, they rose to the challenge. And I just think the Packers, when the dust settled, we've said this from the very first game, even after they lost in New Orleans in that horrible thing, the season opener, when the dust settles, the Packers, they're going to be there.
They're going to be there.
Just, that quarterback is just that good. And the running back is going good. The offensive line's going, and defensively they're solid. They're able to go into Arizona, beat him with 2 of their best receivers gone, and Adams, 3. Yeah, to have
3.
them all out and win that game, that's a pretty bold statement.
Yep. No, that was a lot of that. Like we said, that was Aaron Rodgers, boy, and they. I could tell how the way that game was going. Arizona got bamboozled a little bit. They thought Green Bay was kind of come in there limping, playing the flute out of the side of their mouth, with the knee tied up. No, that wasn't the deal. And then by the time they woke up, it was too late, and it was a shame how it ended for him. That play in the back of the end zone, that was weird.
Yeah,
that was weird, but that's the way it is. Hey, Green Bay. So talking Green Bay going to Kansas City. Now they're bringing their 7-1 record down there to a really disjointed Kansas City team at 4-4.
Well, the theme in that locker room this will be, we're going to get better against this team. This is going to be, we win this thing and we're back in everything, so that'll be the theme. But just watching them, they're just, the air's been taken out of that room somehow, some way. They are just a down in the dumps kind of, they just don't play with inner energy or enthusiasm. It could be a beatdown if you're not careful.
Yeah. Titans going on to take on the Rams. The Rams, boy, they got lucky on this one. They don't have to deal with the big man, Derrick Henry, right? That's like something from heaven, okay? And then on top of that, you pull off a huge trade in Von Miller. Two questions there. Is Von Miller healthy? How healthy is he? And number two, gosh, you always take a pass rusher when you can get it. You don't complain about that. But what they really needed was a marquee running back. But I don't think anything is out there like that available.
No, I think that's right. I think what you said is exactly right. But first of all, when you get a speed rusher off the edge like that, then you just figure that's going to trump the running back. You're going to just makes you that much better on defense. And they're really good on defense. They probably have the best personnel on defense, arguably, in the league. Really.
That's right. Yeah.
So
that's right.
And here's the danger here too. Those teams that we just talked about, Tampa Bay, playing New Orleans, and New Orleans has their third quarterback. No way New Orleans wins that game. It's the same thing here. Tennessee is going to play the Rams. No, they don't have the big running back now, and there's no way they can win this. I don't know.
No,
because there's a whole bunch of other guys in that team. They're playing pretty good.
Yeah, Mike, this league.
Tennessee's a good team, and somebody. And I apologize for not knowing who the other running backs are, but you didn't go into the season without a really good second team running back, and that's why we drafted Jackson and behind Marshall, because if Marshall went down, we didn't have to change everything that we did. We want to still be able to do some of those things, and I'm sure knowing them and how solid that team has been built, that they'll have a good running back. They'll have a good answer for it.
Yeah, no, they definitely will. And the second, you're going to laugh at this, the second leading rusher last week was Ryan Tannehill, and then Woodside is the next back up. So yeah, they're going to have to. Someone's going to have to step up and do something. But you watch now. Vrabel's a good coach, and like we saw the Packers, a lot of people bet that the Packers were going to go in there and stumble. And I'll admit now, I was on that pessimistic side of that coin as well, because with all the guys they had out, and just I didn't see any way they could do it, because they're not great defensively. They're not great team defensively.
No, but they're still a top 10 defense in the league, and that's when we first saw them play. There's no way, but I was looking at it, they are,
and they are right.
But the thing that was interesting watching that game, Herbie Moskowitz, his first catch in the game, his first catch in his career, stuff like that. They're giving guys here, Joe Smo, this is his first catch. All these guys, and I apologize, I'm not making fun of their names, but guys I'd never heard of, and the announcer's saying this is his first catch in the league, or this is his first catch, and guys you never heard of that are on that team were making catches in that game.
Yeah,
and he got some of them got the Roger Stink eye too. They didn't go where they're supposed to go. One guy was jogging on his right over there on the right side.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
He zipped the ball out there and hit him in the back of the head or his back. And that was he let him know right away. Anybody can get the ball at any time.
So okay, so we'll leave you to this. We're out of here now. But we're talking about the Tennessee running backs that are available. I'm looking at their depth chart as of right now. This is the updated depth chart, folks. You've got Jeremy Mcnichols, number 28, a street free agent last year, picked up from the 49ers. Okay. And he was on and off practice squads with Indianapolis, with Denver, with Tennessee, Tampa. He's been one of those guys. Okay. So he's coming off the street, literally. And then behind him, Kari Blazingame. That's right. Kari Blazingame. Okay. And he is coming off the Vikings practice squad. He's number 41. So make a note of those two guys.
That's generally not a good deal when you can't pronounce the name of a guy. It's probably not good. I'm disappointed. Right. I thought they would have a good answer with the number 2. I'm disappointed.
Unless my depth chart is wrong, Mike, and it's updated because Derrick Henry is listed on the injured reserve. So they've updated that part. And then you've got the rookie fullback, Torrey Carter. So between Mcnichols, Blazingame, and Carter, somebody's going to emerge as the new Derrick Henry.
Or we'll see a transaction here today.
Or we'll see a transaction real soon. This could be real interesting. So anyway. All right, brother, that's it for me, man. We got to roll. I know you got things to do.
All right, Ronnie.
We'll talk about some more football next week right here on Run It Again podcast. Ron Pitts, Mike Martz. Take care, Mike.